I'm Patricia Wilson, 67 years old, and after working as a nurse for 4 decades, I thought my retirement savings would finally let me enjoy my golden years. My son Robert was always the light of my life, especially after losing my husband. When Robert and his wife announced their pregnancy, I was overjoyed. Then came that dinner where they said those words I never expected. "Mom, we need your savings for our baby." The next day, I emptied my accounts and boarded a plane. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Looking back now, I realize how much of my life I spent caring for others. 42 years at Memorial Hospital will do that to you. I started as a young nursing graduate in 1978, working the overnight shift nobody wanted. By the time I retired, I was supervising the entire pediatric ward. Those children gave my life purpose, especially after I lost Gerald. My husband passed away 12 years ago. A sudden heart attack while mowing the lawn on a Sunday afternoon. One moment he was there, waving at me through the kitchen window, and the next he was gone. The doctors said it was quick, that he didn't suffer much. That was little comfort as I planned his funeral, and tried to figure out how to live alone for the first time in 30 years. Financial discipline became my anchor after Gerald died. I picked up extra shifts whenever possible, sometimes working 60-hour weeks despite my age. My colleagues thought I was just keeping busy to avoid grief, but there was more to it. I was determined to secure my future. Every paycheck, I put away at least 20% into my retirement account. I lived modestly in our small 2-bedroom apartment, drove the same Toyota for 15 years, and learned to invest wisely from a financial advisor at the hospital credit union. Through it all, Robert was my pride and joy. Everyone called him Rob, but to me, he was always Robert, my little boy with his father's eyes and my stubborn chin. Raising him alone after Gerald died wasn't easy, but we managed. I remember teaching him to ride a bike at Jefferson Park, running alongside him until my legs ached, refusing to let go until I was sure he could balance on his own. I attended every school event despite my difficult hospital schedule, sometimes coming straight from a night shift, still in my scrubs, just to see him receive an award or play in the school band. The day Robert graduated college was perhaps the proudest moment of my life. First in our family to earn a degree. I sat in that audience fighting back tears, thinking of Gerald and how proud he would have been. Robert looked for me in the crowd after receiving his diploma, and when our eyes met, I felt like everything I'd sacrificed had been worth it. Robert met Emily at a mutual friend's wedding 4 years ago. She was charming, witty, and beautiful, with long auburn hair and a dazzling smile. They danced all night, and when Robert introduced us, Emily hugged me warmly, saying she'd heard so much about Rob's amazing mom. Our relationship started wonderfully. We had Sunday dinners together, went shopping for holidays, and she even asked me to help choose her wedding dress. Their wedding was a joyful affair, though smaller than Emily had initially wanted due to budget constraints. I gave a heartfelt speech about watching my son grow into the man standing before us, and I meant every word. I contributed significantly to their wedding fund, wanting them to have a beautiful day without financial stress. Emily's parents, divorced and remarried to other people, provided less support than expected, something I noted but didn't mention. My retirement party happened just 6 months after their wedding. My colleagues decorated the hospital cafeteria with blue and silver streamers, shared embarrassing stories from our decades together, and presented me with a scrapbook of memories. Dr. Lawrence, who had worked with me for 30 years, gave a touching speech about how many lives I had touched. I felt valued, accomplished, and ready for my next chapter. That next chapter centered around a dream I'd nurtured for years, a small cottage on the coast of Maine. I'd visited Portland once during a nursing conference and fallen in love with the rugged coastline, the lighthouse views, and the peaceful atmosphere. 4 years I'd researched properties, saved real estate listings, and calculated exactly how much I would need. My retirement fund was carefully planned to purchase a modest home there and support me comfortably for the rest of my life. The Thanksgiving after my retirement brought wonderful news. Robert and Emily announced they were expecting a baby. I cried tears of joy, imagining holding my grandchild, passing down family stories, and creating new traditions together. I immediately started knitting a baby blanket, choosing soft yellow yarn since they wanted the gender to be a surprise. I felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was during that same Thanksgiving dinner that I first noticed something concerning. Emily made several comments about their small apartment, sighing about how difficult it would be with a baby. I offered suggestions about rearranging furniture or converting their home office, but Emily seemed uninterested in solutions that didn't involve moving. What struck me as odd was Emily's designer outfit and new jewelry. Despite these supposed financial struggles, the purse she casually tossed onto my couch cost more than my monthly pension. Robert had a good job in marketing, and Emily worked in public relations for a cosmetics company. They should have been comfortable, even with a baby on the way. By Christmas, money had become an uncomfortable topic. Robert asked if I could help them get on their feet before the baby came. I offered to buy the crib and some essential baby items, but I sensed this wasn't what they had in mind. Emily mentioned her friend's parents who had given them a down payment for a house as a baby gift. The comparison hung in the air between us, unspoken but clear. I tried to redirect the conversation, asking about their birth plan and sharing stories about when Robert was born. But something had shifted. As I served Christmas pudding, I caught Robert staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't the look of my loving son, but something calculating, assessing. It sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the December cold. The first real crack in our relationship appeared in February, about 3 months into Emily's pregnancy. Robert called me late one evening, his voice tight with stress. Their car needed unexpected repairs, something about the transmission. The bill was $2,000 and they were short. Could I help them out? Of course I said yes. Robert was my son and I had the means to help. I transferred the money immediately, receiving only a brief text message thanking me. No call, no visit, just a quick thanks mom, you're a lifesaver. It felt transactional in a way our relationship never had before. March brought Emily's baby shower, hosted by her workplace friends at an upscale restaurant. I brought my handmade blanket and a set of classic children's books. The gift seemed modest compared to the expensive stroller and designer baby clothes others brought, but I believed in practical, meaningful presents. During the luncheon, one of Emily's colleagues mentioned how lucky they were to have me, with all those nursing savings. I wondered how my finances had become a topic of their conversations. After the baby shower, Robert and Emily's visits became more frequent, but different in nature. Each visit seemed to include a financial emergency. Their refrigerator stopped working. Emily needed special prenatal vitamins not covered by insurance. Robert's car required new tires for safety. Each time I helped, though the amounts grew larger. During these visits, Emily would often make passive-aggressive comments about my simple lifestyle. Once, looking around my apartment, she said, "It's so interesting how some people can be content with so little, especially when they have all that money in the bank." Robert didn't contradict her, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. One Sunday dinner in April, I mentioned my plans for the main cottage, showing them some listings I'd bookmarked. "This one has a perfect little guest room for when you bring the baby to visit," I said excitedly. Robert and Emily exchanged a look I couldn't interpret, and Emily quickly changed the subject to her pregnancy discomforts. When I tried to return to the topic later, Robert interrupted to ask if I had any dessert. The following week, Emily started complaining more vocally about their apartment. "It's just too small for a baby," she insisted. "The nursery would have to be the size of a closet. I don't know how we'll manage." Robert nodded sympathetically before turning to me. "Mom, you know you could help us out. You have all that extra money just sitting in the bank. Wouldn't you want your grandchild to have a proper room?" I felt ambushed but kept my composure. "I'd be happy to help buy some furniture for the baby's room," I offered. "Or perhaps help you reorganize to make better use of your space." Their disappointment was visible. Emily's mouth tightened, and Robert sighed heavily. "That's not really what we meant, Mom," he said. The rest of the evening was strained, with conversation limited to safe topics like the weather and hospital gossip. Later that night, as they prepared to leave, I overheard Emily whisper to Robert near the coat rack, "Your mom is sitting on a fortune while we struggle. It's not fair to the baby." I pretended not to hear, hugging them goodbye with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I noticed a change in Robert over the following weeks. My loving son, who used to call just to check in, was replaced by someone calculating, Someone who measured my worth by my bank balance rather than our shared history. When he visited, his eyes would drift to the modest furnishings of my apartment with something like disdain, as though judging me for not spending more despite my wealth. Anxiety began to follow me like a shadow. I had trouble sleeping, often lying awake wondering where I'd gone wrong in raising my son. Had I spoiled him? Had I somehow taught him that my resources were automatically his? I thought I'd raised a man who understood the value of hard work and independence. When I gently asked Robert about his own savings during a phone call, his reaction was immediate and defensive. "What's that supposed to mean? You think I'm not providing for my family?" he snapped. "Not everyone had the luxury of a stable career for 40 years, Mom. The economy is different now." I apologized, though I wasn't sure what for. In May, we attended a family gathering for my niece's graduation. I was enjoying catching up with relatives I rarely saw when I overheard Emily telling my cousin about my excessive retirement fund. "Patricia could help so many people with that money," she said. "It seems selfish to hoard it all for a vacation home when family members need help." My cousin looked uncomfortable and quickly excused herself. My friend Nancy from the hospital noticed the change in me. Over coffee one morning, she said bluntly, "Patricia, you look exhausted. What's going on?" When I explained the situation, her expression hardened. "They're taking advantage of you," she said. "You worked hard for that money. It's yours to enjoy." Her words resonated, but I struggled with the conflict between helping my son and protecting myself. The pattern continued when Robert asked for a small loan of $5,000 for home office equipment so he could increase his income. I agreed after some hesitation, and he promised to repay me within 6 months. That deadline came and went without mention. When I gently reminded him, he looked surprised, as though the idea of repayment was a novel concept. "I thought that was a gift, Mom. We're family after all." Sitting alone in my apartment that night, I faced a painful realization. My relationship with my son was fundamentally changing, and not for the better. The Robert who had looked up to me, who had valued my wisdom and respected my boundaries, seemed to be disappearing. In his place was someone who saw me primarily as a financial resource to be tapped. The knowledge sat heavy in my chest, making it difficult to breathe. By June, when Emily was 6 months pregnant, the situation had deteriorated further. One Tuesday evening, Robert and Emily arrived at my apartment unannounced. Emily looked distressed, her eyes red as though she'd been crying. Robert had his arm around her protectively. "Mom, we need to talk to you about something serious," Robert began once they were seated on my couch. Emily sniffled dramatically, one hand resting on her growing belly. Emily claimed her obstetrician had found complications that required an expensive specialist, not fully covered by their insurance. The treatment would cost $12,000 out of pocket, she explained, showing me some papers with medical terminology I wasn't familiar with despite my nursing background. "We wouldn't ask if it wasn't for the baby," Robert added, his voice strained. "This is your grandchild we're talking about." I promised to think about it, asking for the specialist's information so I could learn more about the treatment. Their reaction was oddly hesitant, with Robert saying he'd text me the details later. That night, I researched the condition Emily had mentioned and the specialist they'd named. Some information didn't add up, with treatment protocols different from what they described. When I called the specialist's office to inquire about costs, the receptionist quoted figures significantly lower than what Robert and Emily had claimed. The next time we spoke, I offered to pay for specific medical bills directly rather than giving them the lump sum. "I can call the specialist's office and provide my credit card information," I suggested. Their frustration was palpable. "That's so complicated, Mom," Robert complained. "Why can't you just trust us with the money? Don't you want your grandchild to be healthy?" That question stung. Of course I wanted my grandchild to be healthy. But something felt wrong about their request, about the inconsistencies in their story. Eventually, I compromised by agreeing to pay $8,000 toward the treatments, sending the money directly to Robert's account. The gratitude I received seemed perfunctory, followed by weeks of minimal contact. In July, Robert asked if I would co-sign for a mortgage on a new house. "Nothing extravagant," he assured me, though the listing he showed me was for a 4-bedroom home in an exclusive neighborhood, priced well above what they could reasonably afford on their salaries. Robert, that's a big commitment, I said carefully. Have you considered starting with something smaller? Maybe a townhouse or a condo? Emily, who had been quietly listening, suddenly burst into tears. You don't care about the baby at all, do you? She accused. You want us crammed into some tiny apartment or awful condo, while the baby grows up without a proper yard. Is that really what you want for your only grandchild? Feeling cornered and guilty, I suggested a compromise. I can't co-sign a mortgage, but I could help with a down payment on a more reasonable home. I offered $20,000, a significant sum that represented nearly a tenth of my retirement savings. Their reaction wasn't gratitude but disappointment. That's barely enough for closing costs on a decent house, Robert muttered. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, and their demeanor toward me turned cold. They left early, Emily claiming she felt unwell. After they left, I sat in my silent apartment, a feeling of unease growing. Something fundamental had shifted in our relationship. The son who had once been grateful for even small gifts now seemed to expect unlimited access to my finances. This suspicion was confirmed a week later, when I used Robert's laptop to check my email while visiting their apartment. When I opened the browser, I was shocked to find multiple tabs open to articles with titles like How to Access Parents' Retirement Accounts and Convincing Elderly Parents to Share Assets. I closed the laptop feeling physically ill. That same visit, my neighbor Judith from the apartment next door later told me she had heard Robert yelling at me through the walls. I couldn't make out the words, she said, but he sounded angry about money. Are you okay, Patricia? I assured her I was fine, though the truth was far from it. Increasingly distressed, I called my sister Diane to confide my concerns. I feel like I'm just a bank account to them now, I admitted, my voice breaking. Every conversation turns to money eventually. Oh, Patty, Diane sighed. You need to protect yourself. You worked too hard for too long to have your retirement hijacked, even by your own child. Emily's baby registry, which she'd sent to all family members, featured only luxury items. An $800 stroller, a designer bassinet, a solid wood crib that cost more than my first car. When my niece Karen commented on the extravagance, Emily replied that, only the best is good enough for our child, and fortunately, Grandma Patricia can help with that. The situation worsened when I discovered Robert had borrowed my credit card without clear permission. He claimed I had offered it for buying baby supplies, which I had no recollection of doing. The charges included expensive baby clothes, but also restaurant meals and electronics unrelated to the baby. One afternoon, while looking for a recipe book in my home office, I noticed financial documents had been moved from their usual place. My recent bank statements were arranged differently, and my retirement account folder was not where I always kept it. When I mentioned this to Robert, his explanation about helping me organize didn't match the actual changes I'd observed. My anxiety manifested physically. I developed insomnia, often staying awake until dawn, replaying conversations and wondering how my relationship with my son had deteriorated so badly. I had panic attacks in the grocery store, at the park, even while watching television. My doctor suggested anxiety medication, concerned about my elevated blood pressure. In August, just a month before Emily's due date, they invited me to what Robert called a pre-baby dinner celebration, at an upscale restaurant downtown. They arrived dressed expensively, Emily in a maternity dress that I later discovered cost nearly $500, Robert wearing a new watch. Throughout the meal, they complained about their financial struggles, and the stress of preparing for the baby without adequate resources. As I excused myself to use the restroom, I overheard Robert tell Emily in a lowered voice, "Once Mom sees the baby, she'll give us whatever we ask for. No grandmother can resist a newborn." Emily's laugh in response sent a chill through me. I returned to the table with a forced smile, wondering if I even knew my son anymore. September brought the dinner that would change everything. Robert made reservations at Rosewood Restaurant, the most expensive establishment in the city. "We have something important to discuss," he said over the phone, his tone suggesting good news. "Wear something nice, Mom. This is special." I arrived to find them already seated at a prime table overlooking the city skyline. Robert immediately ordered champagne, dismissing my reminder about Emily's pregnancy with a wave of his hand. "It's for us to toast," he said. "Emily will have sparkling water." Emily was radiant in a designer maternity dress, her neck adorned with a pearl necklace I hadn't seen before. Most noticeable were the diamond earrings catching the light when she moved, certainly a recent purchase. Meanwhile, they spent the first 20 minutes detailing their mounting bills and the stress of preparing for a baby on a tight budget. I noticed the calculated way they set up the conversation, Robert glancing at Emily for cues, Emily nodding slightly at particular moments. They had rehearsed this, I realized with growing unease. After our entrees arrived, Robert set down his fork and reached for Emily's hand. "Mom, we've figured out our financial situation," he announced, his voice suddenly businesslike. "We've come up with a plan that makes sense for everyone." Their plan, as it turned out, involved my entire retirement savings. They had broken it down into specific allocations: a down payment on a $500,000 home in Oakwood Estates, the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, a complete nursery renovation with custom furniture from a boutique Emily had featured in her PR work, a substantial college fund for the baby, and a new luxury SUV because, as Emily put it, safety is paramount when transporting precious cargo. "We've already spoken to realtors," Emily added excitedly. "There's a perfect 5-bedroom colonial with a pool. We could move in before the baby comes if we act quickly." As I sat in stunned silence, they continued outlining their vision of the future, which apparently included me as well. "You'll have the guest suite, Mom," Robert said magnanimously. "It has its own bathroom and a sitting area. You'll be comfortable there. And you can help with the baby while we're at work," Emily chimed in. "It's perfect timing since you're retired now. No need for expensive childcare when Grandma is right there." I found my voice at last. "What about my plans? My cottage in Maine?" Robert's expression hardened slightly. "Mom, that was a nice dream, but it's not practical. It's not like you need the money at your age anyway. Your needs are simple. You owe this to your grandchild," Emily added, one hand protectively over her belly. "Family has to come first." When I didn't immediately agree, their irritation became evident. Robert's jaw tightened, and Emily's smile became fixed and artificial. "I don't understand why you're hesitating," Robert said. "Grandma Wilson helped me financially when I was growing up. She contributed to my college fund, remember?" What he conveniently forgot was that my mother had lived in a small apartment, working as a secretary well into her 70s because she had given so much to her children. She had helped within her limited means, not by surrendering her entire financial security. Emily's contribution was perhaps the most cutting. "It's not like you need much at your age," she said, eyeing my simple dress and modest jewelry. "Your lifestyle is already so minimal. And wouldn't you rather see your money benefit your family than just sit in a bank?" The final blow came when Robert leaned forward, his expression a mixture of impatience and condescension. "What else would you even use the money for, Mom? You're just being selfish." Selfish. The word echoed in my mind. Selfish for wanting financial security after working for 4 decades. Selfish for wanting to fulfill a dream I had postponed while raising my son alone. Selfish for not wanting to surrender everything I had worked for. "I need to use the restroom," I said quietly, placing my napkin beside my plate. Neither of them seemed to notice the tremor in my hands. In the elegant marble bathroom of the Rosewood restaurant, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Tears streamed down my face, but the woman looking back at me was not just sad. She was angry. For the first time, I saw the situation with perfect clarity. My son and his wife didn't see me as a person with my own needs, dreams, and rights. To them, I was merely a resource to be drained, an ATM with no limit. I washed my face, reapplied my lipstick, and made a decision. Instead of returning to the table, I found our server near the kitchen. "I need to pay for dinner now," I told her, handing over my credit card. "A family emergency has come up. Please tell my son and his wife that I've taken care of the bill and had to leave." "Is everything okay, ma'am?" the young woman asked, concerned. "No," iyan suara tunasli. "But it will be." I left through a side door, avoiding the main dining room, and caught a taxi outside. During the ride home, I sat in complete emotional shock, my mind surprisingly calm and clear. The taxi driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, perhaps concerned by my silence. "Bad night?" he finally asked. "No," I replied, surprising myself. "I think it's actually the beginning of something good." I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Instead, I sat on my living room floor surrounded by old photo albums, tracing Robert's face from infancy through childhood and into adulthood. The gap-toothed boy who had brought me dandelions from the playground. The teenager who had insisted on making me breakfast on Mother's Day, nearly burning down the kitchen in the process. The young man who had hugged me fiercely at his college graduation, whispering, "This is for you, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you." Where had that son gone? When had he started seeing me as a resource rather than a person? Had I somehow taught him this by always putting his needs first, by being too generous, too supportive? As dawn broke, painting my apartment in soft pink light, I made my decision. I would not enable the person Robert had become, even if that meant making one of the hardest choices of my life. My first call was to First National Bank at 9 a.m. sharp. The customer service representative sounded concerned when I inquired about withdrawing substantial funds and closing accounts. "This is unusual activity for your account, Ms. Wilson. Is everything all right?"
"No," Ian suara tunasli.
"But I'm making changes to ensure it will be." She transferred me to a financial advisor who explained my options, including the tax implications of various withdrawal methods. After our conversation, I made an appointment for later that morning. My next call was to Marjorie Klein, an attorney who had helped several hospital colleagues with estate planning. She agreed to see me on short notice, her voice sharpening with professional concern when I briefly outlined the situation. Between these calls, I researched destinations with good healthcare and affordable living costs for American retirees. Portugal's Silver Coast region caught my attention, with its beautiful beaches, excellent medical facilities, and communities of expatriate seniors. The cost of living was roughly half that of the United States, and the climate was mild year-round. Most importantly, it was far away, requiring deliberate effort to visit, not a casual drop-by when money was needed. Before leaving for the bank, I called my sister Diane. "I need to tell you something important, and I need you not to try to talk me out of it," I began. When I finished explaining, there was a long silence on the line. Then Diane surprised me. "You know what's crazy? My daughter Amanda tried something similar last year. Not as extreme, but the same entitled attitude about my savings. I shut it down, but it damaged our relationship." "What did you do?" I asked. "I set boundaries and stuck to them. It was hard but necessary." She paused. "Your situation sounds worse, though. Maybe a clean break is what you need. Just stay in touch with me, okay?" I promised I would, feeling a surprising lightness knowing I had her support. Brandon Miller, the bank manager, looked concerned as he reviewed my withdrawal requests. "Ms. Wilson, these are significant changes. Are you being pressured by anyone? Is someone forcing you to withdraw these funds?" I appreciated his concern. "No, Mr. Miller. Quite the opposite. I'm protecting myself from pressure." With his guidance, I withdrew most of my savings through a combination of certified checks, secure transfers to new accounts at different institutions, and a modest amount in cash. Brandon provided helpful advice about international banking and secure ways to transfer funds abroad. From the bank, I went directly to the travel agency 3 blocks away. The agent, a cheerful woman named Teresa, helped me book a one-way ticket to Lisbon departing the following evening. "Extended vacation?" she asked as she printed my itinerary. "New beginning," I replied. Back home, I began the painful process of deciding what to take and what to leave behind. A lifetime of possessions distilled to 2 suitcases. Photos of Gerald and Robert when he was young. My mother's pearls. Gerald's watch. Important documents. Clothes for different seasons. My e-reader loaded with books. Everything else could be replaced or wasn't necessary. The hardest part was writing the letter to Robert. I sat at my kitchen table, starting and discarding multiple versions before finding the right words. "Robert, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Last night at dinner, I realized something painful. You no longer see me as your mother, but as a financial resource to be used for your benefit." The son I raised understood the value of hard work, respect, and gratitude. He would never have expected me to sacrifice my security and dreams for his comfort. I have worked hard for 42 years. I have earned my retirement and the right to choose how to spend both my money and my remaining years. Your expectation that I would hand over my life savings and live in your guest room as an unpaid nanny shows how little you now value me as a person. I will always love you. I will always be your mother. But I cannot and will not enable the entitled behavior you've displayed. Perhaps someday you'll understand that this decision was made not just for my sake, but for yours too. Real love sometimes means saying no. I've arranged for a small savings bond for the baby. It's with Aunt Diane. The accompanying letter explains that it's to be used for education only. I look forward to meeting my grandchild someday. When you're ready to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect, rather than financial expectation. Mom. I sealed the letter in an envelope, adding Robert's name in my neat nurse's handwriting. Then I prepared a smaller envelope containing a savings bond for $5,000 and a note for my future grandchild, explaining who I was and how much I looked forward to knowing them someday. These I placed in a larger envelope addressed to my sister, with instructions to deliver them to Robert after I was settled abroad. I couldn't risk him trying to prevent my departure if he received the letter too soon. I took one final walk through my apartment of 15 years. The kitchen where I'd cooked Sunday dinners for Robert and later Emily. The living room where we'd celebrated Christmases and birthdays. The small balcony where I'd nursed countless cups of tea while watching the city lights. Each room held memories, but none could hold my future. I called my neighbor Eleanor, a retired librarian I'd befriended years ago. Eleanor, I'm going away for a while, I explained. Would you mind keeping an eye on my apartment? I'll pay you, of course. Don't be silly, Patricia. Of course I will, she assured me. Is everything okay? I hesitated. It will be. I'm making some necessary changes. My final stop before leaving was the building manager's office. I explained that I might be selling the apartment in the coming months and would be in touch with details. He seemed surprised but wished me well on my adventure, as he called it. As I completed these preparations, I experienced an unexpected feeling. Lightness. Each decision, each action toward my departure, lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. The anxiety that had plagued me for months began to recede, replaced by a sense of purpose and even excitement. The next morning I called a taxi to take me to the airport. Looking at my 2 suitcases in the hallway, I felt a momentary panic. Was I really doing this? Leaving my home, my country at 67 years old? Starting over in a place where I knew no one, didn't speak the language? Then I remembered Robert's words. What else would you even use the money for? You're just being selfish. My resolve hardened. I was not being selfish. I was finally, after decades of putting others first, choosing myself. The taxi driver loaded my luggage while I took one last look at my apartment building. International terminal? He confirmed. Yes, I said. I'm going to Portugal. Vacation. New life, I answered, surprised by the confidence in my voice. At the departure gate, I experienced a storm of emotions. Grief for the relationship I was leaving behind, relief at escaping the constant pressure, determination to build something new, and yes, fear of the unknown. But as the plane lifted off American soil, I felt something else too. The unmistakable sensation of liberation. The flight to Lisbon was 9 hours of alternating between anxiety and exhilaration. I barely slept, my mind racing between doubts and plans. Had I overreacted? Was I being impulsive? Then I would remember the calculating look in Robert's eyes, Emily's sense of entitlement to my life savings, and my resolve would strengthen again. Arrival in Lisbon brought a wave of exhaustion mixed with nervous excitement. The airport signs in Portuguese, the unfamiliar announcements over the loudspeaker, the different faces and fashion styles around me all confirmed the reality. I was truly starting over. I had booked a temporary rental apartment in Cascais, a coastal town about 30 minutes from Lisbon. The taxi driver who took me there spoke limited English, providing my first real taste of the language barrier I would face. When we arrived at the apartment building, the property manager was waiting with keys and a welcome basket of local fruits, bread and wine. Mrs. Wilson, welcome to Portugal, she said in accented but clear English. I am Louisa. Anything you need, you call me. The apartment was small but bright, with a balcony overlooking a narrow street lined with shops. I could see a sliver of blue ocean at the end of the road. After Louisa left, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching people pass below, hearing snippets of Portuguese conversation, smelling unfamiliar cooking scents from neighboring apartments. It all felt surreal. That first week brought numerous challenges. The simple task of grocery shopping became an adventure in linguistic guesswork. Figuring out the local bus system required courage and patience. Setting up a phone plan involved much pointing and smiling. At night, alone in the unfamiliar apartment, the magnitude of what I had done hit me hard. My first panic attack came on day 5. I woke at 3 a.m. heart racing, convinced I had made a terrible mistake. What was I thinking, starting over at 67? I didn't speak the language. I knew no one. My entire support system was an ocean away. I sat on the bathroom floor, gasping for breath, tears streaming down my face. When morning came, I made myself walk to the small cafe downstairs. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Claudia who spoke some English, noticed my red eyes. "Bad night?" she asked, placing a strong coffee before me. "I think I've made a huge mistake coming here," I admitted. She patted my hand. "First week is always hard. Second week better. First month you start to love. You see." Her simple kindness steadied me. I returned to that cafe every morning after that, each visit becoming easier than the last. Meanwhile, Robert's messages began filling my phone. They tracked his emotional journey. First confusion, "Mom, where are you? Are you okay?" Then anger, "I can't believe you just disappear like this. What are you thinking?" Followed by threats, "If you don't contact me soon, I'm calling the police to report you missing." And finally pleading, "Please, Mom, just let us know you're safe. We're worried sick." I sent one brief response. "I am safe and well. I need time and space. Please respect that. I'll contact you when I'm ready." His subsequent messages I read but didn't answer, maintaining the boundary I had set. My second week in Portugal, I met Sandra Johnson, an American expatriate from Florida, who had moved to Cascais 5 years earlier following her divorce. We struck up a conversation at an English-language bookstore where I was searching for Portuguese language guides. "New arrival?" she asked, noticing my obvious confusion at the store layout. "Is it that obvious?" I replied with a self-conscious laugh. "We all have that deer-in-headlights look at first," she assured me. "How long have you been here?" When I said just 10 days, her eyebrows rose. "And you're out navigating on your own already? Impressive." It took me a month to venture beyond my neighborhood. Sandra proved to be a godsend, introducing me to practical resources I hadn't discovered yet. The Expatriate Community Center, English-speaking medical professionals, the best markets for familiar American products when homesickness hit. Most importantly, she introduced me to others who had made similar transitions. "Everyone has a story," she told me over coffee at a beachside cafe. "Some running from something, others running toward something. Often both." Through Sandra, I learned about Portugal's affordable healthcare options for residents and the straightforward process for opening local bank accounts. She connected me with her own banker, João, who helped me set up accounts and explained the financial aspects of living as an expatriate. Finding permanent housing became my next priority. Miguel Santos, a real estate agent recommended by Sandra, specialized in helping foreigners find homes in the region. "Tell me what you dream of, Mrs. Wilson," he said during our first meeting. I described my long-held vision of a small cottage near the ocean, something modest but with character, ideally with a garden and walking distance to a town center. Miguel listened attentively, making notes. "This is possible within your budget," he assured me. "Property here is much less expensive than America, especially away from Lisbon." As I settled into a routine, I began forming connections beyond Sandra. Grace Taylor, a retired teacher from Chicago, invited me to join her weekly painting class despite my protests that I had no artistic talent. "It's not about talent," she insisted. "It's about community." Maria Oliveira, who owned the small grocery store on my street, began setting aside the freshest fish for me, teaching me Portuguese words for various foods with each visit. Back in America, Robert escalated his efforts to reach me, involving other family members in his campaign. My phone filled with messages from cousins, my brother-in-law, even old colleagues, all conveying the same message. Robert was frantic with worry. What kind of mother would abandon her son just before his first child was born? Finally, I arranged a video call with several family members together, explaining my side of the story honestly. To my surprise, after initial shock, several expressed understanding. Robert and Emily have been asking everyone for money, my niece Karen admitted. They approached my parents about a loan for baby expenses last month. When Dad suggested they buy second-hand baby furniture to save money, Emily acted deeply offended. This support from family members strengthened my resolve to maintain boundaries with Robert, while continuing to build my new life. October brought house hunting in earnest. Miguel arranged video tours of properties in several coastal villages, each with distinct character. The fourth property we viewed, a stone cottage in a fishing village called Ericeira, caught my heart immediately. 2 bedrooms, a small but sunny kitchen opening to a walled garden, and just 3 blocks from the Atlantic. The price was less than a third of what comparable coastal property would cost in Maine. I can see myself here, I told Miguel after the virtual tour. Then we make it happen, he replied with a confident smile. Using funds from my secured accounts, I made a down payment on the cottage. The purchase process was surprisingly straightforward with Miguel's guidance and a recommended English-speaking attorney. By early November, I had the keys to my own Portuguese home. On November 12th, I received photos of my new grandson through my sister Diane. William Gerald Parker had been born the previous day, healthy at 7 pounds 9 ounces. I stared at the tiny face, noting Robert's chin and what might be Emily's eyes, feeling a complicated mix of joy and sadness at being so far away for this moment. I sent a small package through Diane, a soft blanket purchased in a local Portuguese shop and a children's book in both English and Portuguese. Robert's message following the birth was the first that didn't mention money or my abandonment. Instead, he simply wrote, "Mom, I wish you could meet him. He's perfect." This simple, genuine sentiment touched me more deeply than I expected, opening a tiny door to possible reconciliation someday. Meanwhile, I was busy making my cottage a home. I purchased simple, comfortable furniture from local shops, planted herbs in the garden, and hung curtains in the windows. My neighbor, Thomas Edwards, a British widower who had lived in Portugal for a decade, offered gardening advice and extra cuttings from his thriving vegetable plot. "The soil here loves tomatoes," he told me, presenting me with several seedlings. Almost impossible to fail. November brought my first dinner party in my rental apartment, before moving to the cottage. Sandra, Grace, and Maria joined me for a meal that combined American and Portuguese dishes. My attempt at bacalhau bras, a traditional cod dish, earned polite smiles and gentle suggestions for improvement, but the apple pie was a universal hit. As the weeks passed, I established new routines that gradually felt normal. Morning walks along the coastal path, Portuguese language classes twice weekly at the community center, Saturday markets for fresh produce, Sunday afternoons painting with Grace and her friends. I rediscovered my long-dormant interest in watercolor painting, finding unexpected pleasure in capturing the coastal light and colorful fishing boats. Thomas often joined me for these walks, our friendship developing naturally through shared interests in gardening and history. He knew the region well and enjoyed showing me hidden viewpoints and small, family-owned restaurants tourists rarely discovered. "I came here thinking it would be my final chapter," he told me one evening as we watched the sunset from a cliffside bench. Instead, it turned out to be a whole new book. His words resonated deeply. What had begun as an escape was transforming into something unexpected. Not just a refuge, but a genuine new beginning. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt truly at peace with my decision, with my life, and with myself. 6 months after my abrupt departure from America, my life had transformed beyond recognition. My cottage in Ericeira had become a true home, filled with simple furnishings, local artwork, and the warm light of the Portuguese coast. The small garden flourished under my increasingly confident care, with herbs, vegetables, and flowers that Thomas had helped me select and plant. My circle of friends had expanded naturally. Sandra remained my closest confidant, but I had formed meaningful connections with many others in the expatriate community and among local Portuguese residents. My language skills improved gradually, enough to handle basic shopping and greetings without resorting to pantomime or apologetic smiles. Seeking purpose beyond my own enjoyment, I began volunteering at a local clinic one morning each week, using my nursing skills to help with basic health screenings for senior citizens. My medical knowledge transcended language barriers, and the grateful smiles of patients reminded me of what I had loved most about my career. On Wednesday afternoons, I joined Grace's painting group, which met at different scenic locations along the coast. My watercolors improved from embarrassing to merely amateur, but the joy of creating something, however imperfect, became an unexpected pleasure. The friendship and laughter shared during these sessions nourished something in me that had been starved for too long. During quiet evenings at home, I often reflected on what had happened with Robert. With time and distance, I could see patterns that had developed gradually over years. My desire to be a supportive mother had sometimes crossed into enabling behavior. Robert's occasional entitlement had roots in childhood incidents I had dismissed or even encouraged. Emily had merely accelerated a dynamic that was already present. I began keeping a journal, exploring these insights without judgment, understanding that recognizing these patterns was essential to healing. I wrote about my feelings of guilt, which sometimes still ambushed me in unguarded moments, and my growing sense of liberation as I built a life based on my own choices rather than others' expectations. After several months of limited contact, Robert and I scheduled our first video call. I was nervous, unsure what to expect, but determined to maintain the boundaries I had established. When his face appeared on my screen, I was struck by how tired he looked, the dark circles under his eyes testament to the realities of new parenthood. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice hesitant. Behind him, I could see a nursery wall painted pale blue. "Hello, Robert," I replied. "How are you? How's William?" He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in a long time. "He's amazing. Exhausting but amazing. Do you want to see him?" He tilted the screen to show my grandson sleeping in a simple wooden crib. Not the designer nursery they had envisioned, I noted. William was peaceful, one tiny fist curled beside his cheek. "He's beautiful," I said, feeling the unexpected sting of tears. Our conversation was cautious but civil. Robert didn't mention money directly, though he did allude to adjustments they'd had to make financially. I didn't press for details. Instead, we talked mostly about William's development, my new home, and neutral topics like books we'd read recently. When Emily briefly joined the call, her manner was polite but cool, her smile not reaching her eyes. Before ending the call, I established clear expectations. "I'd like to have regular video calls to watch William grow," I said. "But I need to know that our relationship won't be centered around financial expectations." Robert nodded, looking uncomfortable but accepting. "I understand, Mom. Things are different now." These video calls became monthly occurrences, gradually growing more relaxed as we established our new normal. Robert seemed to be maturing into his role as a father, speaking with genuine pride about William's achievements and showing more interest in my life in Portugal than I had expected. Emily remained distant during these calls, but her open hostility gradually softened to cool politeness. Through casual comments, I gathered they had moved to a modest townhouse rather than the luxury home they'd planned, and that both had returned to work, with William in daycare part-time. Meanwhile, my friendship with Thomas deepened naturally. We shared meals several times weekly, took day trips to explore neighboring villages, and spent comfortable evenings discussing books or watching British mystery shows he had introduced me to. His quiet companionship filled a space in my life I hadn't realized was empty. When my sister Diane visited in March, 7 months after my move, she was astonished by the change in me. "Patricia, you look 10 years younger," she exclaimed as we embraced at the Lisbon airport. "Retirement suits you beautifully." During her 2-week stay, we explored the region, enjoyed local cuisine, and had long conversations on my garden patio. She witnessed firsthand the life I had built and the confidence I had gained. "You know," she said one evening over glasses of local wine, "when you first told me your plan, I thought you were having some kind of breakdown. Now I see it was exactly what you needed." "It wasn't just what I needed," I replied. "I think it was what Robert needed too, though he wouldn't have said so at the time." This was a realization I had come to gradually. By removing the possibility of financial rescue, I had forced Robert to develop his own resources and resilience. Recent video calls suggested he was rising to this challenge, finding satisfaction in providing for his family through his own efforts. As my first year in Portugal approached, I made a significant decision regarding my grandson. Working with a financial advisor, I established a trust for William with clear terms. The funds would be available only for education, could not be accessed by his parents, and would mature when he turned 21. I arranged this through my sister to avoid direct financial interactions with Robert and Emily that might reawaken old patterns. My modest coastal life brought peace I hadn't experienced in years. Morning walks along the shore, afternoon gardening or painting, evenings with friends or quiet reading at home. The simplicity of this routine contained a richness that no luxury could provide. I had enough for my needs and simple pleasures, with the security of knowing my future was protected. During a particularly beautiful sunset walk with Thomas, he asked what I considered the most important lesson from my experience. I thought carefully before answering. I've learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing yourself, I said finally. Not selfishly but authentically, honoring your own worth and needs. I spent decades thinking love meant always putting others first. Now I understand that without self-respect, even the most generous giving becomes hollow. Thomas nodded, taking my hand as we walked. You can't pour from an empty cup, as they say. Exactly. And sometimes those you love need to learn to fill their own cups rather than draining yours. Looking ahead, I remained open to further reconciliation with Robert. Our relationship was healing slowly, differently from before but with potential for genuine connection based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. I had plans for him, Emily, and William to visit Portugal the following summer, a first step toward building new family memories. Whether that visit would materialize remained uncertain. Relationships damaged by expectations and entitlement don't heal overnight. But I had found patience along with my new beginning. Time was a gift I could now afford to give freely. As I watch another Portuguese sunset from my garden, I realize how fortunate I am to have discovered this truth. It's never too late to start over, to redefine relationships, to choose courage over comfort. The journey from nurse to retiree to expatriate has taught me that endings often contain beginnings. If only we're brave enough to step through the door they open. What about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect yourself even from people you love? Or found yourself starting over when you least expected it? Share your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to our greatest growth. Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about life's unexpected turns, and give this video a thumbs up if it resonated with you. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your worth isn't measured by what you give to others, but by how truthfully you honor yourself.